Today's video is about enlightenment, which is the end of suffering. So there's an old Christian saying, which is the way of the cross, which basically means you are forced into reaching enlightenment through immense suffering and pain, or you reach enlightenment through kicking and screaming. No, you don't want to have to go through that. You really don't. There is another way, but the way I ended up getting there was kicking and screaming into the kingdom of heaven. So I had critical head injuries and shattered my spine, spent a week in a coma, and had 44 bits of titanium drilled into my face from a car accident after living in just constant pain, just immense pain and suffering for as long as I can remember. And the way of the cross is basically saying that the worst thing that ever happened to you becomes the best thing that's ever happened to you. And as soon as I popped out of that coma, instantly, innate in me, I knew that this was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and that it was opportunity. It was just masked in pain. But it is, to this day, the most liberating and beautiful experience of my life. And it taught me the power of the human spirit. It removed the fear of death, and I got to experience consciousness or spirit or the soul, whatever you want to call it, beyond this place, beyond names and forms and egos and linear time. And then you realize that there's no fear. There's nothing to fear. There's no fear of death. And that we are infinitely greater than the story of the past. We're infinitely greater than pain or what someone did to us, what we believe we are the way we are because of this person, the life story. And it's like a radiance and a return to our natural state of being that I've carried in my heart ever since. There have been times where it's diminished, times where I've fallen back into old patterns. But since August 12, 2007, that heart connection and that knowing has always been there. It's not a belief. I didn't read it in a book. It's not based on some religion that you're born into and people say, here's how you should think. Here's an off-the-shelf way of thinking. Adopt this and you'll be fine. It's knowing. It's experience. And when you've been there and you've come back, you've created the life that you want to live, then you realize that we're all powerful beyond measure. All of us. Belief is so fallible. It's frightening. That's why we cling to paradigmatic beliefs. We cling to these stories we tell each other. But it's actually out of fear. And in the enlightened state, when you end suffering and you remove the identification with form and matter, you just return to the natural state of being. You return to a higher truth. It's probably the best way to put it. Because the more you identify with forms and things and labels and time and stories, the more suffering you experience. If you believe you're that image that stares back at you in the mirror, you're going to experience a lot of suffering. Because all form is transitory. All form passes and turns to rotting flesh. The ego doesn't like that. Doesn't like that at all. So it tries to bury its head in the sand. You know, we'll admit it had a birthday, but not that we are all going to turn to rotting flesh. And the truth is there's nothing to fear. There's nothing. How is death not celebrated equally like birth? It's really just that we've fallen so far from our authentic self, from the true self, into this physical body that it's frightening. We get conditioned. Society, your family, media, and your schooling. The ego loves that. There's right and there's wrong. It's all about using the mind, the egoic mind. So naturally we form an identity out of that voice in our head. The terrorist that's inside your own head, but that voice has nothing to do with who you are. It's an illusion, as they say in Buddhism. It's an illusion. Even Albert Einstein said that you see yourself, your thoughts and your feelings, as separate from the whole. But this is some kind of optical delusion. Because Einstein knew that physics proves oneness. The unified field of information gives birth to all form. Matter can only exist because the unified field or the quantum field gives life to it. If you're spiritual, then it's your God or my God, the spirit, or whatever, the universe. Semantics matter, so I always try and use many different labels. But that's all they are, they're just labels, they're just pointers. Words are just pointers. So Einstein said that it's an optical delusion through the five senses. But the five senses plug us into this dimension of space and time, linear time. Bound by entropy, the laws that dictate this universe. But none of that has anything to do with who you really are. Look, I'd give anything to hand the experience that I had in my coma to all of you. Because when you experience consciousness and infinite loving intelligence beyond name, beyond form, beyond a past, and you come back into this body, it's almost comical. It's a joke. And unfortunately, so much of our conditioning and the schooling is a joke. It's comical compared to the higher reality, the higher truth. Because you are that loving consciousness. And in the coma, there was no Damien Horton. There was no identity. There wasn't a past or a future. There wasn't a life story. There wasn't a, oh, woe is me. There wasn't a, my dad walked away and I've lived with depression and I've carried all this hurt and pain and here are my accolades and these are the things I've done. There was no ego. at all, but no loss of who you really are. See, nothing real can ever die, it says in Buddhism. Only illusion dies. So when you make a false self out of yourself with name and form and a pain story, then it causes suffering. And we cling to something that isn't ours to keep. You can't keep something that's not yours. And nothing that is real ever dies. Only illusion dies. And then as I come out through this experience, I can only describe it as light. And it was a tunnel, but it was like matte white, and like you're drawn into something. And then I'm Damien, Horton. I'm 42 kilos. I've got a past. There's some future. I'm in a hospital bed. Crashed my car. And the identifying with the story again took place. And it does not compute. Either everything I've been told and conditioned to believe in life is right. So the appeal to authority, all the teachers that have never glimpsed at the other dimension, the unmanifested realm, they're all right. And I have to reject what I've just experienced. Or I've just found a higher truth and I've got to discard most of and a lot of the conditioning I'd received. And there was only one choice. It's like if you watch old grainy black and white footage. That's the conditioning through people in the unenlightened state who are fixated on form and name, possessions and titles, and the voice in their head. Or ultra 4K, high def, that you have just experienced. And not only that, it's liberated you from fear. It's liberated you from depression and resistance, jealousy and hatred. It's taken that from you. And by following that higher knowing, you've been able to defy medical expert after medical expert after medical expert and heal yourself. So many misperceptions. Oh, the doctors healed you, Damien. No, I was waiting for them to do that. I kept sitting there in the ward thinking, when are they going to come in and heal me? No one got in my head. I had critical head injuries, bilateral frontal lobe hemorrhaging, bilateral temporal lobe hemorrhaging, petechial hemorrhage through the entire brain, uncle herniation. I broke my back in 6 places. No one touched my back. My scapula. Doctors didn't do anything with my scapula. My left clavicle, my collarbone, dislocated from the sternoclavicular joint. Doctors didn't touch it. So I know that I'm the healer. I know that the intelligence that gives life to the body is what heals the body. I've experienced it. It's as simple as that. I've known since I was a kid that if I believe I'm going to get sick, I'll get sick. You hear someone sneeze, you auto-suggest to yourself. It's called auto-suggestion. and then you accept, surrender, and believe in that auto-suggestion and move into a worried, fearful state, then absolutely, you get sick. And I used to notice this. Kid in my class would be sick, and I go, oh no, what if I get sick? And 9 times out of 10, I'd wake up the next morning and say to Mum, my glands are up, Mum, I'm not going to school today. So, experience enriches the mind. And when you are able to find wisdom and find a diamond in the thick of adversity and what some people would refer to as human suffering, that is enlightenment. That is power. That's self-empowerment and wisdom. You can either resist life, which will breed suffering, even resisting death. Your physical form turn to rotting flesh. Everything you've ever known and everyone around you will pass. Or you embrace life, you work with life, and then you start to see the beauty all around you. The beauty in heartache, the opportunity in adversity. It really is the end of suffering. The end of suffering and the acknowledgement of the oneness of all forms of life. And that's enlightenment. And I want this for everyone. I truly do. It's one of the first things I said to my mum. I want everyone to be able to experience this state, which is why I teach, and it's why I write books, and why these workshops are up and running with my new company, Limitless Initiatives. Because it's not just for some. It's not the lucky ones or anything like that. Just read my story, Limitless, and see where I came from. It's your birthright. It is your birthright to experience it, this awakening in physical form. Carl Jung said, those who look outside dream, but those who look within awaken. It's in you. It's all in you. And the moment you stop putting your power in things out there or laying your power at someone else's feet, is the moment you realize that the power to change the world, it's in your hands. It's always been in your hands. So that's today's video. Wherever you are, sending you light and sending you love, and always sending you peace.